All right, good evening. Welcome to Grace Baptist Church. A few people didn't get the word, but no. Actually, a couple people did and just still showed up. I think that I'm sick. Chris is sick. Pastor Matt's out of town, so we almost canceled. But we say, you know what? I'm not going to cancel completely. I'll do a live stream from here. So I knew Cole would be showing up. And so Pastor Matt, you'll meet him apparently Sunday morning. And I've looked at the symptoms of this Delta variant, and I'm not sure if that's what's going on, but if it is, this looks like a common cold. Colds hit me hard. I feel fine. And so this could just be from the smoke. I do not have a fever. So if anybody's worried about any of that stuff, it's just my throat, and I was kind of nervous. I didn't want people to have to show up to church and not know what's going on. So there we are. We're here. Soul winning Saturday morning. I'll have to walk over there and control a little bit of the what's going on behind me. Soul winning Saturday morning. We're going to be baptizing Sunday morning. Nathan, you ever seen that? You ever heard that kid say that much before? And he came to me Saturday and said, I want to talk about camp and tell him what happened. Okay. And kind of a self-proclaimed, socially awkward, and stepped right up and talked about camp and talked about his call to the ministry. And so that was pretty cool. So we baptized him Sunday. I asked him how long I could hold him down and under. And he said until the bubbles stop, so we'll be taking care of that as well. All right. We already asked about prayer updates. If anybody wants to update online about any prayer requests that we have going on, go ahead. But when you do that, remember everybody can read it. And we try to be private with those as much as possible. All right. We are in the middle of our Kingdoms Bible study. And so for me, it has been fun. Should I pray now? We had no song service. Ooh, we need to take an offering? No. I'm just kidding. Well, when I see people reaching for stuff, maybe we ought to. Oh yeah, we won't be able to hit Cole if we wait till Sunday morning. Oh, all right. You know what you do to really show them? You put it in your church's offering plate Sunday morning, earmarked for our church. That'll really win some people over. I've seen some people do it, by the way. All right. So I guess we'll go ahead and pray now. The thing I like about when my voice or when my throat gets a little itchy is it deepens my voice a little bit, and it projects a little bit better. And so that's always a good thing. Let's go ahead and pray. Father, again, we're thankful for our time to meet tonight. We're thankful for our Bibles. Help us to learn from them tonight. Help me to teach. Pray and bless this lesson. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let's go to Daniel chapter 11, please. If you'll also excuse my casualness, I didn't feel like getting dressed today. And so this is it. No collared shirt. That's 3 weeks out of 4. Is that a trend? Yeah. All right, so behind me on the board, you see the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great and how far his conquest took them, all the way into India. Now, Daniel chapter 11 talks a lot about this Greek Empire and it being split into 4 kingdoms. Now, if you might ask a question about, well, why does the Bible not mention people like Genghis Khan, but as John Kerry says, Genghis Khan, or different leaders? Why is it Alexander the Great? And part of the reason is because Alexander the Great and the kingdoms after that directly affected Israel. The Israelites, it's possible. Well, I don't even know the time frame of Genghis Khan, and it's kind of like why would all these different countries not be mentioned in Scripture because they don't relate to the Jews at all. Remember, our Bible is a Jewish book. It relates to relates to Israel, and it relates also, it relates to Gentiles as well. But you're not going to hear about Genghis Khan, these different kingdoms. Now, when we get towards the end, I do believe when we get to Jeremiah and we get to a certain part of Revelation, I do believe it's talking about America, and I can show that some other time. Russia's mentioned, of course, Greece. We'll eventually cover all that. What I've enjoyed about this Kingdoms Bible study is going back, reading, and putting things together a little bit better in my mind. So here we have a map of Alexander the Great's conquests. This would also be Hellenism, the spreading of the Greek philosophies, thinking. Of course, that's the same thing. Alexander the Great was fairly cruel. He's just traveling with 50,000 men, and so once they destroy a city, they destroyed it, so they didn't have to worry about armies coming up behind them. But when they got into Israel, something was different. Zechariah chapter 9, verses 1 through 7, gives the path that Alexander would take through the eastern Mediterranean area, Israel. Matter of fact, my understanding is the priest came out and showed Alexander this stuff, and Alexander treated the Jews with kindness. Matter of fact, so much so that Alexander became somewhat of a Jewish name there for a while. So, Alexander the Great and his resulting kingdom are of huge importance to the Bible and to the Jews, hence an entire chapter of Daniel being applied to it. Daniel chapter 11. Daniel was written in the 6th century BC. Now, Daniel chapter 11 is one of the most attacked chapters in all of Scripture because of its accuracy. And when we say attacked, we're not saying people are, pulling out. Well, no, that wasn't written until the 2nd century. Because I'm not even in Daniel, I'm in Ezekiel. Let's see if I can find. I flipped all the way to Malachi. Daniel. But the interesting thing is, Daniel referred to himself in the first person. I, Daniel, I'm looking at chapter 4. No, actually, that's Nebuchadnezzar, I'm sorry. This is just proving a point off the top of my head, so forgive me the extra I'm actually looking for I, Daniel. No, it's in here somewhere, but 10:7. Thank you. See, I licked my finger, then turned the page to make sure you don't touch my Bible. All right. So yeah, Daniel 10, look at verse 2. Verse 2, in those days I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. So if you're a Christian, you believe the Bible, you have a problem with somebody saying that it wasn't written until the 2nd century. Daniel was written in the 6th, but even if it was written in the 2nd, like critics would tell you, because chapter 11 is so accurate, then you still have a problem that Daniel prophesied the date of the crucifixion of Christ. What are you going to do with that? The wise men show up at Jerusalem and then go to Bethlehem because of the predictions of Daniel. Well, so even if we place that at the 2nd century BC, you still have a huge problem there. Sometimes we just listen to professors a little too much. The Bible's the Word of God. God said it. People wrote it down. And there you go. People talk about this document Q that both Mark and Matthew copied off of. No, God spoke to Matthew, God spoke to Mark, and gave us those documents. They are different enough to where they can't be off the same document. But anyways, Daniel chapter 11, we're going to go through all of the verses here. Next week, we're going to talk about Daniel's image and how it relates to Israel. That's going to be fun. That, I'll have a handout for you. Notice there was no prayer sheet handouts because you know what? I didn't want to be handed out my cold. And so, again, there's a lot of sarcasm there. But, yeah. Daniel chapter 11 The prophecy runs from about 529 to 164 BC and covers most of what happens to be the intertestamental period. It's a continuation of the vision in chapter 10, which we did not cover in this Bible study, but it's given in minute historical detail, making this one of the most attacked chapters in all of the Bible. Critics say no one could have known everything revealed in this chapter beforehand. One day, towards the end of the tribulation, people are going to look back at the book of Revelation, and there's no way they knew all this, but it's always been here. But anyways, they look back at this and said, no. I got ahead of myself, so I'm skipping notes here. Notice that in verse 1 here, that this same angelic messenger tells Daniel that in the first year of Darius' reign, he stood to strengthen him in order, no doubt, to make these prophecies sure. As Satan has his princes try to do everything they can to interfere with and stop the work of God, even so does he assign his princes to see that it's carried out. Now, let me also tell you, when we get to these dates, I'm not the one that compiled the dates. I'm not the one that compiled the names. I'm glad to go through Scripture, but if the other information is just easily copied and pasted, I'll use it. So this was written hundreds of years before it happened, and so let's pick it up here in verse 1. Also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood up confirmed to strengthen him. Now, remember the Medes, there's the Medes and Persians, would be the second empire after Babylon. Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, Medes and Persians, and there was a bloodless coup, C-O-U-P. And but notice here, this is talking about the angel, not Daniel, and it's talking about 2 years prior. And now I'll show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than they all, and by his strength through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. Now, if you want to gander up to the TV over here. So there you see the Greek Empire. Hopefully you can see this at home. And I got to use the right mouse. All right. So we're going to talk about this in a moment. Here's the Greek Empire divided into 4. You see at the bottom here, this Egyptian kingdom is hard to see because it's the same color as the sea. And so, but if you look over here, that's the kingdom of Ptolemy, and that's a name that we're going to recognize. But you see here, so it's Ptolemy, and then you see this right here, and then you see the little division in the middle. Why has Jerusalem and Israel always been a point of contention? Why can't it just be divided out straight? Why can't it just be settled? And it can't be. It will one day, but not now and not even back here. So one kingdom, another one. And so then you see some other kingdoms that are there but weren't part of the original Greek Empire when they're divided out. So when we talk about the divisions here in a minute, that's going to be the 4 that it's going to be divided, and it's going to be so close that people will look at it and say, you know what, no, that's not Bible. Or that was written later. So let's go back over here. For some reason the mouse is, the pointer is disappearing when I go to the navigator. Alright, so the 4 kings to stand up yet in Persia are these 4 kings. Cambyses, you see the dates there, known as Ahasuerus in Ezra 4:6. Smerdis, known as Artaxerxes in Ezra 4:7. Darius Absaces, I mispronounced that one, referred to in Ezra 4:24. And then Xerxes, he is the Ahasuerus of Esther, and also the king that would have led, if you watch the movie 300, I'm sure you fast forwarded a certain scene, but if you watch that, that would be Ahasuerus, Xerxes, that led the Persian Empire against the Greeks, and that's all found in Esther. You see a party trying to rally the troops at the beginning, and then you see him a while later coming back, licking his wounds because he lost. So that's where you find that. All of these things fit together. And so these four kingdoms are, remember, the Persian kingdoms. They are not the Greek kingdoms. So the image we're going to talk about next week, it goes from the head is Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire, the chest of silver, which is the Greek Empire, and then the belly of brass, which is the Roman Empire. And so when we get into all that stuff, this is still the head kingdom before it moves to the chest kingdom. Nope, I'm sorry. This is the chest kingdom. And so sorry about that, but we'll cover that in depth next week. So these are the four kings yet to stand up in Persia. You see them there. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided toward the four winds of heaven. And not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up even for others beside those. So this mighty king is talking about Alexander the Great. It doesn't pass on to those that follow him. There might have even been a slight disagreement or misunderstanding about when they're asking him, who does your kingdom go to? I'll flip the slide here in a minute instead of walking over there in the middle. Did you get it? Okay. And do you want me in the middle of it? Do you want me to step back so you can get it? You want me to stand in front of it and flex? Pose with my Rhodesian fighting stick? Indeed. Of course, I can give you the notes if you want them. All right. So this is talking about Alexander the Great and his kingdom being divided. Got back to that. The misunderstanding, the tale is that they asked him who he should go to, and he said, to the strongest. But to the strongest in the Greek sounds like it, I don't mean in the Greek like I'm talking about the Greek word, also sounds like the same when it says to, and there's a general heading back towards Greece, and some think that maybe he meant that. But to the strongest is what was understood, even though there's some that tell you he couldn't talk at the time, and that's highly probable as well. Either he died of alcohol poisoning, other poisoning from an enemy, could have been syphilis, could have been a whole heap of things. We don't know. So, Alexander the Great is the he-goat of Daniel chapter 8. He died while in his prime at 32 or 33 years of age, and it didn't get passed on to his sons because his half-brother Philip, his legitimate son Alexander II, and his illegitimate son Hercules were murdered, and his four generals then divided up his kingdom, or divided then towards the four winds of heaven. There was also part of it is that he handed his ring to a certain man, and then that man, I forget the name, agreed to rule, but it would be Alexander had a son that was about to be born after he was dead, and so then one of the generals didn't go along with it because he wasn't consulted, and it goes up from there. So his four generals, let's go ahead and look at those. See if we can get the mouse not to disappear. So you see those are the same names. You got a picture of that? You good?
Yes.
And then you see those same names on this map over here, off to the left, although you probably can't see them. So Ptolemy is the main one that we're going to want to know, and Seleucus. Yep, mouses keep on deleting. Jarrett, how do you do this? Getting ahead of myself. All right. You know what? I'm just going to teach the rest of the lesson from over here. And instead of fighting a computer and trying to show you names, if you want to have the names are right here and give you the notes. All right. So, now look at verse 5. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. Now, as that's written, you'd say, what in the world is this talking about? But then as it happens, you could see it. So the king of the south and north, the king of the south is Ptolemy. The strong one above him, north, is Seleucus. And because Seleucus then became stronger than Ptolemy. And these two are mentioned because Israel is directly in between them and was directly affected by their ongoing battles. The other two kingdoms don't matter anymore. Look at verse 6. And the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in those times. So, after years of fighting, these two countries entered into an alliance. This happened in 250 BC between Ptolemy Philadelphus. He betrothed his daughter Bernice to Antiochus Theos, grandson of Seleucus. So we're marrying now kingdoms together. And by the way, as soon as I'm done with this lesson, you're not going to remember any of these names, except for Ptolemy and Seleucus. And probably the guy Philadelphus, you could probably remember that. So, 2 years after the death of Philadelphus, which would be Bernice's father, Theos divorced Bernice and remarried Leotis, his first wife, and then poisoned Theos and had Bernice killed. She then installed her son, Seleucus II, to the throne of Syria. Interesting. So we'll keep on going. Verse 7, out of the branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail. So here we have, it's talking about Ptolemy III, Bernice's brother, ascended to the throne of Egypt, then invaded Syria, executed Leotis, and sacked the country, while Seleucus II hid in Asia Minor. What's funny is how all of the, we're only into verse 7. We're going quite a ways here, and people tell you, well, the Bible was written by a bunch of shepherds, as they, flung this piece of paper over a rock while they're watching sheep. Nope, didn't happen. God spoke, they wrote. Verse 8. And shall also carry captives into Egypt, their gods and their princes, and with all their precious vessels of silver and gold. And he shall continue more years than the king of the north. So the king of the south shall come into his kingdom and shall return into his own land. So that's Ptolemy III's triumph. So after sacking Syria, he returns with captive silver, gold, and precious stones. Verse 10. But his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through, and then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. So this verse is somewhat parenthetical, but his sons refer to the sons of the northern kingdom of the Seleucids in Syria. It says here, and one shall certainly come, is a reference to Antiochus the Great, who is king of Syria, and we're going to find that down in verse 15. Are you remembering most of this? I hope not. Verse 11. And the king, now we're going to read 4 verses and then we'll cover what they are. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, anger, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north, and he shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand. And when he hath taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it. And the king of the north shall return. Do you see how detailed this is? Written hundreds of years before it happens. And shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall be exalted, shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, and they shall fall. So after Ptolemy III returns to Egypt, Seleucus II, who ran to Asia Minor to avoid the war, we referred to him a minute ago, gathers an army and goes into Egypt to counterattack Ptolemy III in 240 BC. He is unsuccessful. Seleucus II dies, and his son, Antiochus III the Great, rules Syria from 223 to 187 BC. Ptolemy III dies and is succeeded by his son, Philopaton, who is also Ptolemy IV, who rules. Antiochus III is defeated by Ptolemy IV. And in 203 BC, Ptolemy IV dies, and Ptolemy V, who is Epiphanes, his son rules Egypt from 203 to 181 BC. Now, if we're getting to 131 BC, we're getting very close to the birth of Christ. We're within 130 years of it now. So the Greek Empire is still in charge 130 years from the birth of Christ. Verse 15. You know, it's interesting because even after the Roman Empire takes over, Romans speak Latin. We still have a Bible that's written to us in Greek. Anyways, so the king of the north shall come and cast up a mountain, take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, Israel, which by his hand shall be consumed. So this Antiochus III the Great defeats Ptolemy V in battle. This happens on the outskirts of Sidon. Remember, Jesus referring to Tyre and Sidon, gaining control of Israel. Verse 17. He shall also set his face to enter in the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of women, and corrupting her, but she shall not stand on his side, neither be for him. So this is talking about his daughter. Her name ends up being Cleopatra. This is not the Cleopatra that you know. I had to go find that out, by the way, too. Cleopatra that we know, that was depicted in the movies, was closer to 63 BC. And come to find out, she is Cleopatra, I think, the fourth. So this is not talking about her. But Cleopatra, daughter of Antiochus the Great, who gave her in marriage to Ptolemy V. Hope you're keeping all that straight. There's going to be a quiz. This was a political marriage in which Antiochus the Great used to keep peace between himself and Ptolemy V of Egypt while he did battle with the Romans. Also, Antiochus hoped to use his marriage to be able to later conquer Syria. However, Cleopatra became a loyal wife and sided with her husband against her father. And again, these are things you can just pull up on Wikipedia and read. Although Wikipedia is going to be wrong on the date of Daniel. All right, let's keep going. All right, verse 18. After this, he turned his face to the isles, and shall take many, but the prince of his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. Without his own reproach, he shall cause it to turn upon him. This is talking about Hannibal and Antiochus joining forces. Hannibal of Carthage. Again, if you don't know your history, but you've watched Gladiator, you would know the name from there. Hey, if we have to use movies to make sure we learn our history, that's fine. So he did this with a large naval force. It was defeated by the Roman army of Asia Minor, led by Scipio Asiaticus. I don't even know how to pronounce that one. Verse 19. Then he shall turn his face towards the fort of his own land, and he shall stumble and fall and not be found. So he dies in disgrace. This is Antiochus. He died in disgrace in 187 BC, having put under tribute by the Romans. Of course, closer kingdom. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. Interesting how the Bible disparages a raiser of taxes, isn't it? Remember when we voted that Oregon could no longer raise taxes without us voting on them? Wasn't that nice? And so then, instead of that, what they do is they artificially inflate our property values, and therefore our tax rate goes up just because of that. Yeah. Isn't that nice? So, I have a quote here from Wikipedia, and it's referring to Daniel. The most widely accepted critical view posits that the author of the text was an anonymous writer living in the Maccabean period under Antiochus V Epiphanes during the 2nd century BC. I don't say BCE, I say BC, but whatever. Who compiled ancient legends with a pseudograph of visions. Other more conservative textual scholars, however, maintain that the historic Judeo-Christian tradition that Daniel, the protagonist of the narrative set in the 6th century BCE, I just said it, is likely also the historical author of the text. But again, even if you want to go with the most critical, you still have the problem that he foretold the date of the crucifixion and gave enough information to where the wise men would come to the east when they saw the star, or from the east when they saw the star. So now, verses 21 through 35, we have the main character of chapter 11. And this is Antiochus Epiphanes. He was the younger son of Antiochus the Great. The Bible labels him a vile person. He is a biblical prototype of the coming Antichrist when we get down to verses 36 through 45. We're going to speak briefly about the Antichrist tonight. He gets the kingdom by flatteries, promoting peace, even though he doesn't get the honor of the people. That's what happens. So we'll read four verses here. And this is talking about that guy who is foreshadowing the Antichrist. Before we get there, when we get to the image of Daniel, remember it's the head of gold, the Babylonian Empire, the chest of silver, which is the Greeks. Nope. The Medes and Persians. The belly of brass, which is the Greeks. And then the Romans. And then the Romans, that's two legs, split into two empires. The Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire. And so they split in two. And so that pertains to Israel. But then when it then comes down to the feet, separates down to the feet, it's 2 feet, because it's still a western and eastern kingdom, which then during the tribulation will then try to oppress the Jews. And so that's the correlation between these kingdoms. Remember, we're talking about kingdoms. All right. Verses 21 through 24, and in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably, and shall obtain the kingdom by flatteries. We're not talking about the Antichrist, but however, that's part of what's going to be happening. Remember, the Antichrist doesn't come onto the scene with a name tag that says, "Hi, I'm the Antichrist." You get that, right? Hey, nobody's going to know who he is. He'll be revealed before the rapture can happen, but that doesn't mean that we're going to know who he is. How do I explain that? Who's a young politician, up-and-coming politician? Let's go with the Republicans who don't make anybody mad. Let's say Ron DeSantis. You want to say that one? I'm a fan of the guy. But let's say he's the Antichrist. He has already been revealed, even though he doesn't have the name tag, even though he hasn't been outed as the Antichrist. So that's when the Bible talks about that man be revealed. It's talking about that he be revealed as a person. And so then it won't be until 1,260 days later, possibly, that people realize who he really is. Maybe longer, who knows? You understand that the first half of the tribulation, backing up, we call it the tribulation, even though we shouldn't. The first 3.5 years of the tribulation are going to be a peaceful time. You pesky Christians won't be here. Won't that be grand? Your house, my house on 35th Street, will sit there vacant. There'll be some squatters. They'll come in there. They'll enjoy. I have some Pepsi in the fridge right now. I've been trying to cut off the Pepsi because, trying to cut down the carbs, trying to do all that. But when you start having somewhat of a cold in your chest, nothing feels quite... A Pepsi, the carbonation going down your throat touches your soul. Right? And so I'm waiting to get home to get back to that because, well, actually, my throat doesn't even hurt, but still. On a Sunday after a sermon, Pepsi does great. All right, let's go ahead. And after the league, verse 23, work deceitfully, he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. He shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter them among the prey and spoil and riches, and yea, he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds even for a time. And so we find that he builds up his power quietly until he's strong enough to take what he wants. We're still talking about him for the next few verses. And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to a battle with a very great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. So again, this is Antiochus Epiphanes. He defeats the Egyptian king Ptolemy Philometor. That's how you can measure philos. In Egypt, just east of the Nile Delta. Ptolemy, I said the P, Ptolemy Philometor, I'm sure that's wrong, is the son of Cleopatra, who is the sister of Antiochus Epiphanes. This makes Ptolemy Antiochus's one's nephew. So keep on going here. Yea, they that feed on the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain. And again, that's one of the reasons we know this portion of Scripture isn't talking about the Antichrist. The Antichrist will not be killed by those around him. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. Notice there, speak lies at one table. See, the whole thing is here's the problem with everything right now. Let's just go ahead and draw this to modern day. We don't know who's telling the truth. None of us, it's hard for us to figure out who's telling the truth, who's not, and we don't trust our government right now to tell the truth. It's a problem. All right, verse 27. And both these kings' hearts shall be... I'm sorry, I just read that. Sorry. Verse 29. At the time appointed, he shall return and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. This tells us the Antiochus again attacks Egypt, but the outcome this time is obviously different. For the ships of Shittim, shall come against him. This is actually talking about Rome now. Therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. So verse 30 tells us that he stopped by the Romans, ships of Shittim. And in his rage, Antiochus stops in Israel on his way back to Syria, and with the help of some traitorous Jews, violate the holy covenant. Where did I say we start with the other? Okay, verse 31. Not yet. An arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. Remember the abomination of desolations? It's still not talking about the Antichrist here. It's talking about, this even continues a little bit, when Jesus referred to how somebody mingled, people's blood with the sacrifice, sacrificing swine in the temples, things of that nature. So, verse 31 gives us a historical look at what he did foreshadow in the forthcoming Antichrist in Daniel 9:27 and Matthew 24:15. So, starting in September 6, 171 BC, it's interesting how we can go back to those days and get, I was reading something today about the Greek Empire. It's talking about Alexander the Great died on this day or that day. But yet we don't know if Christ was born within a 5-year window, right? And it's kind of funny. Well, we do. But we just have to... Matter of fact, it's kind of... That makes it accurate, because then you could go back to those earlier dates, look at what happened when Nehemiah was... when the king said to go rebuild the walls, the Daniel's 70 weeks start from that commandment and go forward. So you just fast forward 483 years, and there you find the crucifixion. Anyways. Oh, I almost skipped something here. We got to be careful about that. It's a good thing when you reach down into your facial tissue thing and there's cobwebs down there. I haven't been sick in a couple of years. So, all right. Now catch this. From verse 31, Antiochus turned against the people of Israel, killing over 40,000 Jews in 3 days. So on December 15th, 168 BC, he sacrificed a cow on the altar of the temple and erected a statue of Zeus. His intention was to unify his kingdom with one religion and one culture modeled after the Greek-Roman system. So there is another abomination of desolation. But again, we have men all throughout history who attempt to bring the kingdom of heaven under one man rule. It's not going to happen yet. But we're going to talk about that in a moment. Verse 32. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. Interesting there. Who's the exploits talking about? Does anybody have a guess? You know it. As soon as I say it, you're going to slap your forehead. So, verse 32 here informs us that some Jews will succumb to his flatteries, but the ones who know their God shall be strong and do exploits. That's a military term. As Antiochus Epiphanes was having his way, God stirred up an aged priest named Matthias and his 5 sons, who were given the name Maccabees, which means hammer. So when you hear about the Maccabean period, that doesn't, by the way, mean that the apocryphal books of the Maccabees are accurate or God breathed. They could be accurate, but it doesn't mean they belong in the Bible just because they might be accurate of history. See, these freedom fighters defeated Antiochus and cleansed the temple on December 25th, 165 BC. This is 2,300 days after the start of hostilities. So Israel was ruled by the Maccabees and their descendants until they were defeated by the Romans in 65 BC. The victory of the Maccabees is still celebrated today in a Jewish festival called what? Happens right around Christmas. Hanukkah. The 12 days of Hanukkah. That's referring back to the Maccabean period. And their defeat here. And so verse 33. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days. That's not good. Now when they shall fall, they shall be holpen with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. And some of them of understanding shall fall, and to try them, and to purge, and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. So, verses 33 through 35 relate the story of Antiochus Epiphanes, now the vile person, now referring forward to the Antichrist. Notice it said there, till the time of the end of verse 35, because it is yet for a time appointed. So now we're going to deal with the Antichrist. Verse 36. So now, remember, the image has the head, chest, head of gold, the chest of silver, the belly of brass, the hips and thighs of stone. And so they split into two. But when you come to the feet, you have so far a 2,000-year gap between the thighs and the feet. We're going to cover that next week. 2,000-year gap. So that falls into here. Now we have another 2,000-year gap. 2,000-year gap assumes the Lord's return within our lifetime. Never, well, I'm not assuming that's going to happen, but anyways. Now watch this. The king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. So, verse 36 begins with the conjunction and, linking it then to verse 35, giving us the time period in which the king will appear, and the time of the end will be then the last days. He is a king of fierce countenance, according to Daniel chapter 8, verse 23. He is the prince that shall come, from Daniel chapter 9, verse 26. He shall be totally self-willed, according to Revelation 3:17 and 17:13. He will utterly detest God. He will be allowed to prosper until the indignation be accomplished. Remember, the Bible also says he's not going to have regard for women. Verse 37. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. So that nor the desire of women probably eliminates the Santus, right? Alright. So anyways. So, verse 37 tells us he will not regard the God of his fathers. We look at Daniel 8, 9, 9:26. Some people then believe that the Antichrist will come from one of the 4 divisions of this Greek Empire that was split into 4. I'm not saying I back that up. Could be. It also means that the Antichrist could be, at some point, a professing Christian. It says the God of his fathers. You know, it's just interesting. So, he won't regard him. So, will he be one of those that goes through the deconstruction that we've been talking about? Verse 38. But as the state shall he honor the God of forces, and the God of whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and precious stones and pleasant things. God of forces is not talking about the God we serve. The Antichrist will worship and honor the God of forces, which is probably Satan. from whom he gets his power, Revelation 13:2, which enables him to require that all men worship him as God. Remember, the Antichrist is going to know dark sentences. The false prophet is going to raise this Antichrist from the dead. And then people are going to say, wait, I remember something about this. The power to resurrect. This image is going to, at some point, become alive and talk. It's going to be crazy. And anybody who's still a Christian during the tribulation is going to be absolutely mocked. Is going to be absolutely... we're going to talk probably Sunday about the strong delusion that's going to be sent. All right. But don't hold me to that. It might be the next one. I still have to figure out if I'm going to talk about baptism or not. Verse 39. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with the strange God, whom he shall not acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. So verse 39 gives us the agenda of the Antichrist. He will worship a strange God, acknowledge him, give glory, cause his people to rule, and divide the land for money. This guy's going to be so peaceful. Remember, people believe erroneously that the temple must be built before the rapture can happen, and that's not the case. There just has to be enough peace on earth, and it's going to happen where the temple is going to be built at least on the same mound or in the same area as where the present mosque is in Jerusalem, and because that has to happen before the abomination of desolation stands in the place where he ought not. There's going to be so much peace that's going to happen. He'll confirm the covenant. Remember, covenant. He doesn't make a covenant, he confirms the covenant. Covenants are already in place. All right. And at the time of the end, so that's talking about the end, talking about coming up right before the second coming of Christ, talking about right before Armageddon. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind. So south, north, and with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. We're going to come to a place, and if you go look at the area around there, yes, I'm sure there's going to be airplanes. But however, if we believe that there's a nuclear attack some point in this, then airplanes and things of that nature will be rendered obsolete. And so all of a sudden now you're going to have horses and all sorts of neat stuff again. Remember, the Euphrates has to be dried up so that, I'm sorry, from your angle, the Euphrates has to be dried up so the armies of the east can cross over and enter into the valley of Megiddo to prepare to go down and attack Jerusalem. And there's going to be so many people in that valley that their blood will flow 180 miles. Anyways. Verse 40 takes us to the events surrounding the time of the end. The Antichrist shall be attacked by the kings of the south and the north, which is a confederation of countries led by Egypt and Russia. And that's Ezekiel 38 and 39 if you want to look those up. These nations are destroyed and the Antichrist then rules them. However, this is not the final battle which he gains control of the earth. So again, we're looking for the king. This is a kingdom book. All the kingdoms on earth, the kingdom of heaven, under one man. That's what the Antichrist will finally pull off. Briefly. Verse 41. He shall enter also into the glorious land. So remember, when you see the abomination standing where he ought not in the temple, when the Antichrist stands there and declares himself as God, what did Jesus say? Run. And if you want to look at music, run for the hills, whatever the case is. But if you're in the area of Judah, you're about to die. So go, run, get out of there. However, he doesn't get control of the land where the Edomites, Moabites, and Ammonites used to dwell. I'm sorry, did I read verse 41? Oh, glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. Where's Edom right now? Where's Moab? Where's the Ammonites? There aren't any, are there? So this area, wherever that is going to be the place. Remember the dragon that spits a flood out trying to kill the Israelites? And then there's countries that take them in. Those end up being the sheep nations in Matthew chapter 25. That's what that's talking about. See, all this stuff just works together. The Bible is an amazing book. All right, a couple more verses. We'll be done. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. And he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, And over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. And so, giving their power to the Antichrist. So the Antichrist occupies and plunders them. But now watch this in verse 44. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away many. So, verse 44 then informs us that while the Antichrist is in these countries, he hears bad news. Notice here that the West is not ever mentioned. Some people believe that's because he is the Antichrist base of power is the West. Because there we see east and north, right? And before we said in verse 40, the king of the south and the king of the north. So we never find west mentioned. And so the Antichrist could be from a Western nation. I had one person make a suggestion one time that the Antichrist could be from a Muslim nation because there was the same number of countries. I think it was 10 that are the same number in Revelation, the different crowns and all that. I thought that was pretty interesting, but I don't think it fits because he is of the West, I believe. Verse 45. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So verse 45 there reveals that he will break his treaty with Israel. The desolation of abomination occurs, and he declares himself God until Jesus rides by with his horse, speaks, and the whole thing's over. Daniel chapter 12 verse 11 says this, and from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. 1,290 days is found all throughout Scripture, referring to end times. The first half of the tribulation, and again, it's not the tribulation. The second half is the Great Tribulation. First 3.5 years, 1,290 days. Times, half a time, 40 and 2 months, 3.5 years. All those things are the first 3.5. Then you divide that in 2 because there's also then the second half. But you see that right there. 1,290 days. I said earlier 1,260. So there's a 30-day overlap on this one. Sorry. Matthew 24 verse 15 says this. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So wait. Jesus assumed that Daniel wrote Daniel. So if you assume that somebody else put together Daniel, you have a real problem with Jesus Christ because he assumed that Daniel wrote Daniel. And Jesus assumed that it was accurate. Listen, watch this. Stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. And that's where it talks about flee. All right. We had no song service. We didn't cover our prayer requests very long. So, getting out before